Seeing this?
Yep, looks good.
Awesome. So, yeah, I don't know exactly how everybody wants to run through this, but my thought is, I'm not going to necessarily bother reading every line to everyone, but that we'd kind of jump into this example and see if we can work through it, if that sounds okay.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I think it's worth, just as we open up, this is an example that a few of us have used to try to learn a bunch about Plutus V2. And the top of the page is great because at least it gives us the questions we need to have answers to, right? Okay, what is inline datum? What is a reference script? And so hopefully by doing this exercise today, we can kind of notice what our questions are and where this documentation feels sufficient and where it might be worth it to make it a little easier to understand.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, so in light of that, I did just share the link if anybody didn't have this from earlier, didn't know where I got it. So it's in the chat if you want to have that pulled up. And then, yeah, I guess I'll kind of jump in. Kind of starting here. This section, if I'm not mistaken here, is mostly just a description of what we are going to go through. So in prep, I kind of started to look at some of this stuff already. This is kind of where it starts as far as action, which is stuff that we've, if you're doing the course, you've already done as far as cloning Plutus apps. But then it jumps into the example folder. So let's see here. That is, I'll kind of show you all what I'm dealing with here. I cloned a second one just to make it a little easier. I was having some issues the other day anyway, so this kind of cleaned things up for me. And if you jump into Plutus apps, you can kind of see there's a Plutus example folder here. And then within that, you're able to, and I already have, generate these Plutus V2 scripts just with what they have there following this command. Just, cabal run, all that stuff. And that gave me those scripts. Already have Cardano CLI and node running. So that kind of drives us into this section. They give a shell script that's available here. I've copied this into this file. I'm not sure that it's going to make sense to run it as y'all can give me some feedback here, but to run it as a script, just because that's kind of going to go through everything without us seeing exactly what's happening step by step. But I've started to fill out some of these variables so we can kind of walk through what it's going to do, and then either, jump into the command line one command at a time, or if we're all comfortable with it, maybe if once we've got it all filled out and know what's going to happen, running it and seeing if we can get it to go. Oops. Any thoughts on that so far? All right. I'll assume that we're good to keep going then. So kind of the first step that it gives us here, and once again, I'm kind of running through a lot of this. I did, everything I've given you so far is the prep work that I've done. So from here, this is kind of the first time I'm going through it as well, except for maybe a brief read through. So you'll have to bear with me as I kind of go through some of this a little bit slowly, perhaps. And keep an eye out too. This documentation is made for a different testnet. You can see testnet magic 42. And I'm not running a node for that testnet, nor do I have any wallets addresses set up for it or anything like that. So I'm going to try to, as we go through, adjust everything to work with the pre-production testnet on one. So if you see me miss something that's going to cause issues, don't hesitate to cut me off and make sure that I catch that.
Actually, Trevor, I do have one quick question.
Yeah.
You showed in VS Code that you have the source code for those Plutus examples. Where'd you get those? Source Plutus
Yes.
example over there.
So Plutus example, that is actually in the Plutus apps directory. So
It is. Okay.
yeah, I don't know at what git commit this shows up, which is one of the other reasons that I recloned it, because if the instructions in this example we're using have you clone and then without checking out a specific commit, have you immediately jump into this folder. It does show up at the alpha v1 commit, but I don't know if there's any changes. And when you originally clone it, you're actually at a different commit than alpha v1. So I don't know how up to date it is at different points or when these first show up. But if you just clone the Plutus apps Git, then you're going to have it in there.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I just found that and dropped that into the chat too.
Great. Cool. Anything else before I start trying to figure this out?
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, let's dive in then. So, on workspace. Okay. So this starting here, this is going to be creating a reference script, add a transaction output, inline datum, and sending ADA to the script address with datum. So up to this point, we're going to try to get everything ready, essentially to make this transaction. So I'm going to attempt to do this using a couple of addresses. One of them, I set up an address for just reference scripts that we're going to use to send this transaction to have kind of our reference scripts or datums or what have you there. And then I've got a couple of other wallets that we'll use for other transactions as need be, just that I've been using throughout the course. So we are at this point here. So I've got testnet magic set to 1 already. And then it's going to be a matter of figuring out what the rest of these are and adjusting as we go. So change address, I'm actually, to make this simple on us, I don't know exactly how they had wanted this set up. The documentation here doesn't explain perfectly what they wanted these addresses to correspond to. They give you dummy addresses that contain nothing. Obviously, I don't have any keys for those, so I've changed them to addresses I do have, and we're just going to kind of reconstruct this as we go along. This UTXO address is based off of a location where they have some kind of UTXO keys, but that is not something that, as far as I'm concerned, I have set up properly or have access to. This script actually comes from somewhere else, if I'm explaining this well. It is not in the Plutus apps. It comes from Cardano node somewhere, and I no longer have access to it if I ever did. So we're kind of going to use addresses that I do have and hopefully not mess up this file too bad if you're following me so far. So for a change address, I have set up this dummy address to be an existing address that I have that has UTXOs available, so on and so forth. And then this read-only address I have already set up, so that should be good. That's where we're going to have our reference script file go. Plutus stake script up here. We've got these set up to where they output to, which is all right here in my Plutus examples folder in the generated Plutus scripts v2. That's the place where it'll automatically compile to if you follow the directions in the example. Same with datum file path. I've got that set. Those are going to be here in your data folder. And then UTXO address. This is going to be the same as our first dummy address that we used. X out. Plutus spending script. Okay. I think I'm one address short from what they want me to have here. Sorry. So let's see. We've got a read-only address that's going to have our reference script file. We're going to have an address that's sending a TX in, which I've got. Okay, and it looks like we're sending an inline datum to another address. Does it look like I'm seeing that right here?
Yeah, I was wondering about the logic for using so many different addresses here.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well. It doesn't really so I can kind of jump back in here. It doesn't really have any significant explanation as to why it uses so many addresses. So once again, kind of working through this for the first time as well. My thought was going to be, when I first started into this, that we would have a single address sending to a reference address, but which we could do. We could restructure it, but
yeah. Well, that's this dummy address. It is for holding reference scripts.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, does anybody here have an instinct about, well, if I'm going to be using reference addresses in the first place, can you make a good argument for creating a different reference address for your Plutus scripts versus your Datum? I don't know.
Here we go. Hold on. It looks like, okay, this is going to be the script address.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so we're also funding. All right, I'm following now. Maybe I need to read through some of this first again. But so we're also in the same transaction funding the script.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so that'll be one of our addresses there. And I think actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think that it actually is going to automatically generate that for us up here in this script. So that address, I won't have to change this. If we do run the script, or if we don't, I'll just make sure to grab this so that we have that address. And then we have a datum for that, TX out. TX out. And then we're sending some amount of Lovelace back to our dummy addresses. With another datum. I think maybe I shouldn't have changed this last. There's no datum on that, so we should be fine.
This is actually a really good spot to look closely, right? Because you can see the same inline datum is being added on lines 73 and 75. Right. In fact, look, there it is on line 70 as well. The same datum file path is being used. And so you've got this. What's the difference between each of these? On line 70, where's that one going? some read-only address,
Right.
which feels similar to having a dummy address in my mind. I don't see a need to have a dummy address and a read-only address.
Right. So that's actually part of that is probably confusion caused by the way that this is set up. So they give dummy addresses up here that I think they named dummy addresses because they generated them. I have set this dummy address to be one that I can send from.
Good.
But I'm
Just in
starting
case.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. But I'm starting to wonder why it needs to have a datum in it, or if I'm doing that wrong and I misunderstood the purpose of the dummy address. So let's see. If I look at this, so here's, secondly, we are creating a reference script at a TX output. So yeah, it wants us to have this reference script at a dummy address, and then preparing a TX out to be used as a read-only reference input. So yeah, it actually does have us using more than one address to store reference UTXOs. Unless I'm reading this section wrong.
That's how I read it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then notice just in the whole transaction, maybe it's easier to see in VS Code, you're also including the same inline datum file at the contract address too. That's on line 73.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then we actually have another address in here where we're adding, I think we see this. We have another script at another address.
So maybe, right, putting your minting scripts at yet another reference address. That's a thing. These docs seem to be encouraging us to do that. I'm not convinced I want those at separate addresses, but I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it.
So what we can do then for this, and I'm open to some suggestion then, is I think we've about got this structured, but we'll have to decide how we want to use these addresses, or if we want to generate a couple new ones. I can either generate another reference address, use the dummy address that we have here for sending, have a reference address for this read-only address and for this minting script address, and store this inline datum also at the spending address as we have it set up now. Or we can start to kind of consolidate some of these references to a single read-only address and see how that turns out if we kind of go with the way that we've kind of been talking about it in previous live coding sessions. Any thoughts on what we want to experiment with?
Anybody else have an opinion on that? Let's just run through it and see it working. And then once it does work, like I have big questions about how exactly does this inline datum interact with that contract? But I don't want to raise that question until we just see this working in the first place.
Okay, sounds good. So let's do this then, and kind of make sure that I keep this sort of a little bit more pure to the way that they had it set up, so that we make sure that it works. And what I'll do is, so rather than try to figure out where, unless somebody understands Bash a little better than I do, rather than trying to figure out exactly where they're generating this UTXO address, if they're, where they're storing these keys and how to generate that, what I'll do is I'll take this UTXO address. We'll run this manually rather than running through the whole script, but I'll take this UTXO address, make that a payment address, something that I actually can pull UTXOs from. And then for the read-only address, I have that set as a read-only address already. We will use, for dummy address, hard for me to honestly tell if they're planning on having us be able to spend from that or not. So I will make that actually have, let's see here. I will make that another address that I can spend from, and I've been using just in case we need it. Like so. And then for our minting reference script, let's see, address for minting reference script, which is right here. I will generate a different read-only address real quick, and we will use that for this. So let's see here. Let's pre-prod wallet. Minting ref. Yes. And then we'll just real quick generate a complete Shelley address so that we have everything we might need. So that that is set to go. And then if I cat payment address, then we can drop that in right there. Okay. Does that logic make sense? Is everybody following me so far? Cool. Okay, so we'll keep going here. I will need to generate, let's see. Don't have this generated because this is once again expecting me to be in the Cardano CLI directory. So I will real quick jump in here. I think I've already made a transactions folder. Good. And then Cardano CLI query. Is it protocol params?
Yeah, dash parameters, full word.
Dash parameters, got it, got it. Protocol parameters. Testnet magic 1. No, I'm missing something. Oh, Cardano node socket path is not set. That would do it. Jump here. You can just probably add that to batch. Oh, out file. And let's go. Is it a hyphen? Yes.
Yep.
Okay, there we go. So now we're rolling here. And we will just, because we'll run this from the same folder. That's this file here that we're messing with up here. It doesn't really matter. We probably won't run the script, but that should do it. And then here we will just create that in the same folder. We probably don't even need these for this. We need to set our UTXO secret key. So that is not set yet. And that will be my prod wallet 1. Copy location. So testnet magic. Okay, so I think if we use these variables here along with quickly generating this spending address, then I think we're going to be ready to do this transaction unless somebody's noticing something that I've missed. Any thoughts so far?
Jump off the deep end. Let's see what happens.
All right, let me start dropping some of this info in here. We're going to need and then let's get this. Now this is looking for, I don't know exactly. This is probably a little bit of a gap in my bash knowledge, but it's doing something funny there. And I'm just going to do this the quote unquote long way.
What was happening?
It's okay, so it's I don't so this is a little bit of a gap in my bash knowledge, but I don't fully understand why it's got a variable for Cardano CLI or exactly what it's trying to declare here.
Yeah.
So I'm just simplifying that by not using it.
Yeah, I think this allows you to have different versions of Cardano CLI, right? So if you look up top, where was this defined up top? Line
right here.
Yeah, line 10. What I don't see somewhere else is that Cardano CLI bit, but I think this just this would allow you to have multiple versions essentially.
Got it. Okay. So I don't think Yeah, I don't think we'll need that then, but I did get rid of that, and I do need that. So like so. Okay, let's try this then. I missed my testnet magic bash variable. I think I probably did. Okay, there it is. So then if I grab this, I can make that. Well, here I'll go. So like that. Okay, back on track. And then we don't need to generate that because we've got it hard coded down here. We will need to do this. Don't think I've defined a TXN actually. And we're not in the right location to use that. So let's real quick throw these in. So address, and we want to use whoops. Oh, man. Test net magic. There we go. Okay. Grab something here with plenty of data. That should probably do it. Here. I think this just wants the amount of Lovelace available there, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can correct me if they're seeing something different.
They're doing a little magic here by getting that out file for the UTXOs and then using that to grab that directly from there. That's a great thing to learn, but I don't feel like it's urgent because we're moving towards automating these things on the front end anyway.
Right. All right, sorry, this is a little bit of a slow process, y'all, but I think we should be ready to try this now. Except for that, I'm not using their bash variable. If you see a problem, speak now or forever hold your peace. At least until it gives me an error.
Nice. That's a good error.
Yeah, okay, so it looks like the Loveless out is calculated as 1/6 of the the UTXO that I put in, and that's not enough to cover the minimum UTXO thresholds. So what we can do, I guess the easiest way to do this, part of me wants to see if we can just get by with increasing it for the address output in question, but we'd have to change all of the values to get it to balance. I'm kind of curious if it costs just as much to have a reference datum as a reference script, and I'm guessing it doesn't. But what I'll do is I'll just get a bigger UTXO to use, and that should fix our problem.
It's quite a bit less, and this is actually, I don't think this has much to do with your input. It has to do, that error right there was more about the output.
Right. So the reason I'm changing the input is, and maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but so what we have for all of our TX outs, we use this variable Lovelace transaction in div6.
Yeah.
And what that is it's calculated up here as 1/6 of my TX in. So I could change it individually down here and rebalance to try to get it to work, but I'd have to change. Well, let's see. How many of these do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1/6 of it is going back as change. We could try to rebalance it a little without having to change the TXN and see if we can get away with that. So let's see. We know that this is the 1/6. So we could this one's got a reference script, so let's make it this 921. And then where's our other reference script? So this one. So we can also make this. And then to keep it balanced, because that's more than 1/6 that we've made up, I think, or close to, we can take one of these others. It just has a datum and try to make that lower. And I think we should still have some change left, unless I'm doing my math wrong.
Yeah. This is a great thing to highlight about improving these docs, right? You know, there's a little bit of bash magic going on here, but I think it distracts from the main point, and it doesn't get us to think about these min UTXOs, right? 1/6 of your input is likely to be way more than you need for inline datum or reference datum, but it like we just saw here, it's not sufficient. So you're sending too much to create the datum reference, but you're sending too little for the Plutus reference, all to like show off some bash skills. I think it's worth it to really, you know, do this and focus on what the thing is, which is getting those min UTXOs right.
Yeah. Let's find out if we did.
Well said.
Okay, so I'm seeing, let's see, which one is this? Address ending in QFQ, which is our dummy address 2. Oh, also dummy address. I didn't ever change. We weren't using this one yet. So let me go ahead and clear that out so that I don't get confused. So to the dummy address, this one actually needs to be a little bit higher than the other one, which I'm assuming is going to have something to do with the size of the script.
Yes, it will. That's right. So what was getting in there? There was 9. That was enough for one of them, but not the other. That's cool.
But not the other, yeah. So then if we grab that. Okay, so then let's see, ending in NCC. That's our address for minting script. Ah, okay, we never changed this one, so. So we can do that. But we're probably going to have to lower another one of these. I think that one's safe. Let's see if we got it this time. Ah, okay, so we need to make up another through almost 4 ADA somewhere. We're over on our transaction here. We might not actually have enough here. I'm not seeing a place where I can pull out 4 ADA. Is anybody?
This is great. Right.
So
So you
let's,
can, I mean, you've already got, do you have a change address?
there is a
Yeah,
change
that's
address.
right.
It's
Yeah.
kind of in an odd order
So you
compared
can
to how
always
you.
just throw in another UTXO, right?
Yeah,
Once
that's going to be my plan.
Can I
Since
just
we've
jump
already.
in for a question here?
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I missed it or something, but what are the script files that we're using here? I can see that there are 3 different script files, right? Plutus, Plutus stake script, Plutus spending script, Plutus minting script.
Yes. So those are this document, which Nelson, I don't know when you jumped in. If you missed the very beginning, then you probably would have missed referencing this page, but it's in the chat. And this is, it references when you actually clone the Plutus apps directory that we've been using for the whole course. There is a Plutus example folder within that Plutus apps directory. And you can jump into that example folder, run this command, and it generates these 3 scripts for you. Does that help?
Yeah, but I couldn't understand why we are using what are we like sorry, but what are we trying to achieve with this transaction here? Like, can I just be clear with that again?
Yeah, so kind of what we're trying to do today is, this is a more or less a tutorial given by IOHK to help understand the use of inline datums and reference scripts in Plutus v2. So by the end of this, I believe all that's really going to happen is we're going to lock up a little bit of ADA and then use it, release it to mint some tokens, really just for the purpose of going through the exercise of using inline datum and reference scripts. I don't know that it's really got any more utility in it than that. This for all I know, may not even be the most efficient way to accomplish that task, but the purpose is kind of just to explore inline datum and reference scripts. At least to my understanding. James, you may have something to add to that.
No, that's comprehensive.
Like later on is I don't see a part later on where we're using the Plutus text script. So I'm just kind of curious about it.
The which script?
Plutus stake script, right?
Mm.
The one in the transaction we're trying to make now.
Plutus text script. I can't actually answer that question. I haven't run through this whole exercise before. Kind of learning through it with you. So it's possible that we actually don't end up using it later, although that would be interesting as to why they have us set it up. It's possible that if it's not used later in this example, that the intent is that you've already set up a reference for a future example that we might not go through today, but I actually don't know.
All right, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, this is demoing just everything at once. And I think it's worth a different exploration to play around with the spending script. I already raised earlier, I still have questions about usage of inline datum. And just something at a high level to recognize here, even this transaction does 6 different things, right? And let's even just look at 2 of them at once. If you think about placing funds at a contract address and creating a reference script to interact with that contract address, even those 2 things can happen in different transactions. Does that, how much sense does that make when I say that?
I follow.
Right. Basically lines 75 and 76, that could be just its own transaction, right? Build a transaction with only those outputs to place funds in a contract with accompanying datum. And then you can build another transaction to create the reference script for that contract. Now, why would you separate those? You don't have to, just for its own sake, but you can imagine use cases where the contract will stay the same, but the datum to interact with it might change. And that would be a case, or sorry. Oh no, sorry, I'm talking about datums, but I mean, right, there's never going to be a case where the address stays the same, but the script changes or vice versa. So there's not really a reason to supply these as separate transactions, but you could further fund a contract address in the future. I guess that's one way to think about it.
Mm.
In any case, we're combining a lot of concerns here, and that can make it kind of hard to see what the basic point is.
Awesome. Okay, well, anybody else have questions or comments or whatever? Or, I can go ahead and see if we've got this one figured out.
Let's see it.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, I think I know what I did. Forgot a backslash. Hey, look at that.
Hey, nice.
It's not bad on the fee either, less than half an ADA for all that.
So this is where it gets interesting, right? So this compared to a unlocking transaction where you're attaching a script, that's a relatively low fee. But there's also all of this ADA that's getting locked up at those dummy addresses and with the reference scripts. So
Right.
the analysis, the cost analysis of Plutus V2, on the one hand, we're going to see lower transaction fees, which is awesome. But in order to get those savings, you have to lock up ADA and reference UTXOs. And so for a one-off contract, that's probably not going to be worth it. But of course, it's a simple linear function, right? If we do 100 transactions, well, clearly that'll pay for itself. So where is that line? It's kind of interesting.
Oh, I
Hey,
see.
Roberto. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, would it be possible just quickly to go through the transaction again, just to for the sometimes I don't get it at the first time when I look back into it. I get confused sometimes with the order of the commands and the variables that we're using. Could we just quickly go through the lines and how it's kind of what the flow is and which ones go, kind of what we're using just for reference afterwards?
For sure, for sure. So it just successfully submitted, so that's good. We can check what happened there in just a minute. But yeah, let's go back over what's in here.
And Trevor,
so,
one thing that could be helpful for looking at it is if from lines 71 to 81, you can just add line breaks in between each of the distinct TX outs.
yeah, that's a good call.
So we can really separate those, because that question about order that Roberto has is crucial. And once you can see these as like as coherent chunks, it starts to make more sense.
Okay, so what we're looking at is this block here. I think I've got that all split up right. We'll quickly find out as we go through it. But this beginning section is, that should look all pretty familiar. Basic stuff. We're in the Babbage era. Testnet magic. This variable is set to 1. It's just the integer 1 that just, recognizes the pre-production testnet. Change address. We've got 3 addresses being used, I believe, maybe 4 addresses being used in this transaction. So we have our UTXO address, which is a spending address. That's an address that's got a bunch of ADA in it, can spend back and forth. We've got 2 TXINs. All they contain is ADA. I used 2 because the first one wasn't big enough, but there's nothing special in them. It's just ADA. So then the first TX out is this.
All right, sorry.
Chunk.
Can I just assume that? Can I just assume that the UTXO address variable, that address, that's for your purposes, right? That's for your wallet to keep it organized. Otherwise, you could have just as well used any of the TXINs that you have there, or any other address. Or is there any specific purpose? Is there any reason why that address is used?
Yeah. So the variable names are kind of arbitrary in the sense that they were what was here when we started using this example. So UTXO address it has to be the one supplying the TXINs because it's the one later that has to sign the transaction. But there's nothing special about it other than it has to have something to supply TXINs. Some of these other addresses, for example, this Plutus spending script address, it's not a wallet address, it's a script address. So that has its own special, function. These other addresses, for example, address for minting script, we have set up as a reference only address. It doesn't have anything else in it. It's getting a script, so that will be referenced by other transactions, but not ever spent. Does that start to help make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I think so.
Okay. Yeah. I'll go through the rest of this, and if it still is kind of fuzzy, please
thank
ask
you.
more questions.
Okay.
But yeah. So this first TX out, this is going to a read-only address. So much like the one I was just talking about, it doesn't have any ADA in it or anything. It's just going to hold UTXOs for reference later. This value was given to us by the minimum needed to produce this UTXO. It is going to have attached to it a reference script file. This Plutus stake script, if we scroll up here, is set to a location for this stake script.plutus file. And then it also gets a datum. Datum file path is also set up here to a datum that we were supplied with this example.
Sorry, could I just clarify the what was it that the read-only address? Is that read-only? Is that like a property of the address, or is that just like a clarifying variable name?
Just a clarifying variable name.
Okay.
It's just a standard address.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Here we're assuming the inline datum edits that there is going to be used when we interact with the script that is put for a reference script file here, right?
I am assuming that the purpose of that inline datum file is so that it can be referenced in the future. Yes, because that, like I said, that read-only address, it's just a standard address. So
my question would be like the reference script that we're putting in this UTXO and the inline datum that is putting in this UTXO. Those two are related, right? In the sense that the datum is going to use to interact with that script.
I would also assume so, but I don't actually know. Like I said, the Plutus scripts and the datum files were both generated by this example. I certainly didn't write them, and I haven't gone through exactly how each of them work. I'm sure as we go through it, we'll probably see where that's used. I would like to assume anyway, but I don't actually know. James, if you have anything to add there,
this is my question about datum. Yeah. Right. So what I haven't done all the tests I want to do, but we know that datum still needs to be attached to a UTXO at a contract address, right? So far so good with that. But we also know that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
This isn't a contract address, right? That's what I
exactly right. So one thing we're seeing here is that, okay, you can put inline datum at any UTXO now and you can reference it. Fine. Conceptually, that's fair. It's great to know, right? I can attach datum to any inline datum to any UTXO now. But what I haven't yet seen is a compelling reason to do that. Because number one, if we're talking about inline datum, you can still put that just at the UTXO at the contract address. So why would you need to put it anywhere else? That's my first question. And then the second question is, if you do put the inline datum somewhere else, and let's say you just put a datum hash on the contract UTXO, I haven't yet figured out how to use a reference datum input to satisfy the datum hash that's at the contract address. I don't know if it's impossible or not. I just haven't been able to make it work yet where I'm using some inline datum from elsewhere to unlock some hash datum. So there's still some more tests ahead there.
I think that's not possible.
That's okay. I was starting to wonder. I didn't want to say that yet, but have you seen some evidence of that, Adrian?
Yes, I have looked into the Plutus library repo, and the datum is now a different type. You now have output datum as the original datum type, and 3 different types, like the datum hash, no datum, and the datum. The datum is the inline datum, just in readable form. I can show it later after the example.
Cool. Yeah, it's worth playing with that. I was starting to think that was the case, but I just haven't seen enough to be sure. Thanks for that, Adrian.
Yeah, so I think to sum that up, we're not necessarily sure that this is needed yet, but we're kind of still figuring it out because documentation is confusing at best and missing at worst. But we're learning through it. Does that help? Anybody have other questions about that, or? Cool. So with this next transaction out, this is kind of what we started talking about when we first started building this transaction. James mentioned we're kind of questioning why they chose to use so many different addresses here. And in fact, this is just sending some of that. Now that it's split up, it's kind of easier to see. This is just sending some of that original ADA back to the some of that original ADA back to the sending address. I'm not honestly sure what the purpose of that is, unless someone's seeing something here that I'm not. We could have omitted this, and it would have been fine. The next one, this transaction out, we have our Plutus spending script address. So that's an address of our one of our scripts, and it's also getting a inline datum file. This, once again, this is just a bash variable. We set that, where did we set that? Up here. And it was just determined by the location of this script, which is all over here. Bunch of bash variables to get to essentially sending this output to this address with an inline datum. Then we have another one, the dummy address. It's another reference address. I believe we set that as a reference address. Let me double check here. QFQ. Yeah, I believe that's our one of our reference addresses. Just another. We do have some ADA there. I'm sorry. I'm double checking on my other screen. This one, it looks like it's just another standard address. It's got an inline datum and a reference script. Once again, that's the reason for the high amount of ADA. It told us that in an error that we would need it. And then address for minting reference script. This one is a reference address. So an address that we made purely for storing this script. So it doesn't contain anything else. It's a standard address, but it doesn't have anything else in it. And then the standard parameters file and where to put the out file to. The rest of the transaction follows. Any questions following that?
So just to check if I'm understanding this correctly. So the transaction is sending this Plutus script address Plutus and the inline datum to both the Plutus blending script address and the dummy address and the address for to the Plutus pending script and the dummy address, right? That's where the inline datum is being sent. That's the same inline datum for both of them, right?
Yes, in fact, we have that same inline datum being used in all three of these
Addresses.
TX outs. So that's the dummy address, the Plutus pending script address, and the read-only address.
Why does the minting script only? Oh, because it's the minting script, so it does not an address, so it only gets address for minting script and a reference script file. Oh, so that is also an address that only gets the reference script file. Why doesn't that one get the inline datum? Just a question.
Good question. I'm honestly not sure. I think this goes back to the question that was asked kind of about why this one would get a datum, right? As far as we can tell, there's not really a good reason to give a datum to a standard address. That it's not going to be extremely useful to have both of these in a single UTXO.
Yeah.
So this could just be highlighting another way to have that done. I'm honestly not sure what we're going to find as far as why this one wouldn't have it and this one would, but that's not super helpful. But
no, that's fine. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions, comments? Did I miss anything there, James? Or
and also just noticing that, these are different kinds of scripts as well, right? So Plutus stake script, I see that on line 73, and there's the datum there. Maybe when it comes to staking, there's a good reason to have an inline datum. I'm reading the CIP about extra datums right now just to see if something jumps off the page, but I'm still not finding it. But I'll holler if I see something good.
okay, sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at one of these TX out so we can make sure this transaction went through properly. And let's grab maybe this so we can see both of these present there. Okay, so we've got our TX hash, the amount of loveless inline datum, reference script. Interesting. So yeah, looks like that went through just fine. Okay, unless there's other thoughts on that or anything, we'll move on to the next section of this.
Yeah, what the heck can we do with this thing now that we have it?
Good question. Okay, 8 at the script address, construct the appropriate transaction in order to spend it. Okay, so we should have, we can see this should be the transaction that we're going to be looking for. And one moment, see if I can find. Okay, so we can see that transaction being built here. So we're going to have to kind of go through some of the same thing we just did on the last one and make sure to kind of set this properly. Okay, so kind of going down top to bottom, this stuff is all, and maybe I'll kind of start to divide this up as we go, kind of make it more clear. This stuff is all pretty standard. And then we have a read-only transaction in reference, which we're setting up here. So this is to be our UTXO from our read-only address. So let's go ahead and I think that's actually, I've already got that done here, so that's convenient. We can just snag that. And we're looking for this. I'm going to keep these kind of ordered right here. So that's our reference input for that. And then we're going to have a transaction in, and then a collateral transaction in. We'll have to set these momentarily. And you can see if we were running the script standard, it would just allow us to select these. So that's what we'll end up doing. In fact, let's go ahead and get these set up. XM1 and X. And we can. And our address with actual ADA in it is UTXO-ADDR. Okay, so for a collateral, it looks like if we look further down here, doesn't look like it's going to ask for much in collateral, but I usually use a 5 ADA UTXO for this. So let's try that and see if that's still sufficient in Plutus v2. And then for a TXN, let's just grab something that's got some amount of ADA in it, maybe 13 and change ought to do it, hopefully. Find out. Like so. Okay. And then we have this transaction in total collateral, which, like I said, isn't very much. It's a little over half an ADA. Now, if we look at the document, it can be computed by multiplying the collateral percentage and the transaction fee. That is news to me. So I actually am not sure what it would want us to do there. I've never had to calculate collateral before, so I don't know if anybody has feedback on that, or if we can just try to send it.
So this actually is Well, I know calculating the minimum that needs to be is a nice step, but it's not strictly necessary, and you can get some of the new benefits. Basically, what this is saying right here, it used to be that the collateral UTXO, no matter how much value was in it, if it turned out to be needed, right? If you made an invalid transaction that was accepted anyway, your collateral would be taken. That's why it's there. And it used to be that whatever value was in that UTXO would be consumed. What's new here is optional, and this is just showing you how to use it. You can still
Got it.
just say TX in collateral. You could remove lines 190 and 191 and be totally fine. Okay.
Got it.
But if you want to get the benefits of only paying the minimum collateral, should there be some kind of issue with the transaction, you can find out what that minimum is, specify it on line 190, and then the rest of the value in that TX in collateral UTXO would be returned to the UTXO address. Right. So there's those two different things going on. I think calculating TX in collateral precisely is, to me, less important than just knowing that it won't all be consumed, right? So in the
Right.
past, I just grab a UTXO that has 5 ADA in it. Why 5? Because I know it's more than I need, right? And it's still not an insane amount to be attaching as collateral. So you could just do that, right? You could say, oh, I'm going to use any TX in for collateral, but I'm going to specify some minimum, 5 million Lovelace, 2 million Lovelace, whatever we find out it needs to be, instead of taking the time to calculate it, and then you can still return the rest. Does that like partial benefit make sense to everybody?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. But if we give very little collateral there, then the transaction build is supposed to give an error, right?
Should, right?
I would think so. I think what you're saying makes sense to
it.
me, James, but I had the same question.
Yeah, put like 200,000 Lovelace there and just see if we get that error.
Type that right? Yeah. Okay, let's find out. Okay, so thanks for bearing with us, Lucas. Appreciate it. So let's see here. Interestingly, we're specifying an out file way up here. Also, that name is odd considering we're in the Babbage era, but we'll roll with
everything
it.
Honestly, I think for clarity's sake, it might be worth running this testing transaction here, but not even worrying about we got some minting going on. Yeah, this one doesn't use the script. Okay, this is fine. This is going to mint. Yeah, let's use the whole thing. Okay.
Okay, so let's see, Plutus locked. So then we've got another TX in, Plutus locked UTXO in, and we're going to find that. Interesting, interesting. Okay, so this is going to be the address for minting script, it looks like. So let's query that. that is going to be like so. Spending TX in reference, Plutus reference script. TXN. Okay, that one is going to be, I think I might have that wrong. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Yeah, so what this is doing up here is querying pretty much all of the addresses that we were using, and then allowing us to select based on what's in them. So I actually looked at the wrong address a minute ago. So this UTXO that I just grabbed is going to be used or referenced here, because it is at our minting reference script address, if that makes sense. This locked UTXO is actually at our Plutus spending script address. If everyone's following me and I'm not crazy.
I mean, we all sound crazy here, but this makes a ton of sense.
And that's going to be this UTXO, which will slot in right here. Okay, so then let's see here. It's our reference script, spending reference, TX in inline. Okay, so this is interesting because we were talking about the purpose of having an inline datum present, but this argument sure makes me feel like we absolutely had to have it for this one.
Bingo. And so I was just reading the CIP a little more closely, and it clarifies at least one thing for me. You're never going to do away with having datum on the UTXO at the contract address, right? That part we know. And actually 196 is part of this block. So if you can move line 196 down and move the space above it instead, right? Because look at what we're doing. We're saying, hey, there's a UTXO locked at this contract address. How do you unlock it? First of all, line 198 by referencing the script on this UTXO instead of uploading it like we've been doing in the past. Then line 199 is new, but also kind of forward-looking. We say, okay, the script here is a V2 script, and this is less to compare it to V1 and more of future proofing because we recognize that there will be versions 3 and beyond. Okay, so we're referencing this script. It's a V2 script. And then lines 200 and 201, if you just on the command line run Cardano CLI transaction build just to see all the parameters, I think this is really helpful. So go up to where all the TX in stuff is. Yeah, keep going a little more. So here, right? No, a little even higher. Sorry. Okay, so right, we know we've got okay, TX in. Fine. We can have a TX in reference. That's identified here. We have the ability to specify the version of that script. Fine. But then look at these next, 7 lines here. All of these say spending reference TX in. And then below that, then you've got a bunch of the stuff that we're kind of used to. TX in script file. We had that in Plutus V1. TX in datum. There's a bunch of ways to do that bit, and so on and so forth. But you've got a different version of each of these datum and redeemer tags, depending on if you're using a spending reference script as seen above, or depending on if you're using kind of the Plutus V1 way. And so there's different tags there at each step. Right. And so like I'm looking at spending reference TX in datum file. Down below, there's one that just says TX in datum file, right? But those are not, under the hood, those are not the same thing. And we have to distinguish between, again, when we're using spending reference, we're going to use all of these new things versus the old way down there. And so if you go back to that example, because we're using a reference script, line 198, lines 200 and 201 are there accordingly. But this is to say nothing of what kind of datum we're using, right? So now you go to where it says spending reference TX in inline datum present. That's a mouthful. There's a version of this that just says TX in inline datum present. Okay, because inline datum can be used either way. In this case, it's being used with a spending reference UTXO. And it's directly on the UTXO that's already there. Okay, and so the part of why this is confusing for me is that it's like I'm learning two things at once by looking at that command. And I'm just trying to practice saying it out loud right now. But does that raise questions for anybody?
It kind of makes sense, but my understanding is that even though the inline datum wasn't there, this we can use by the command spending reference TX in datum file and put the datum from the system,
You
right?
still could, right? You could still do that. Even if you're using a spending TX in reference, you can still have an old-fashioned datum hash, and you can still unlock it with a spending reference TX in datum file, right?
So those two commands are different now. Like we have to specify that
Right.
we're using a spending reference. TX.
You specify that we're using this kind of spending reference for the Plutus script part, and then you specify what kind of datum you're using independent of that. And then there's this whole list of ways to reference both of those things.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right. And even if I use a spending TX in reference for the contract itself, there's still a good reason sometimes to use hashed datum. Maybe I just don't want that to be publicly displayed. And I can hear Mix's voice saying, well, you could figure out what that datum was anyway, right? But yes, of course you can. But there's still, sometimes maybe having the hash on there is the right thing for the job. And so this is what we get to figure out. Now with the GBTE, it's interesting because actually inline datum is going to be pretty helpful there. I don't think we need to keep any of the datum on a bounty commitment private. And in fact, because the contributor's pub key hash is part of that datum, and there are some edge cases where we wouldn't be able to find that pub key hash just by looking back at the transaction. It could be really useful to place bounty commitment datum in inline datum and then just reference it and say, oh, it's already here. We don't need to bend over backwards to build a system that reconstructs this datum. It's already on chain. We just have to make sure to build unlocking transactions that are compatible with that datum, I guess is the word. Yes, there he is. I knew I could wake the beast. What's that, Mix?
No, I just your explanation make this question, I mean, at least in my mind. Now we have the option of inline data. Very good. According to the explanation of ZIP32 that you submitted in chat, now we have an option that creator pays the datum, the fee for datum, or consumer. So my question from you is, based on what we can use, we can choose whom should pay the price for the datum. If it is a creator, okay, why should creator pay a price for a datum? And if it is consumer, why he or she should pay a fee for the datum? Sure, for any different situation, things are different, but I wonder what would be your answer to this question. If this question rise up, that who is going to pay for the datum?
Do you think it's possible to have one way of answering that question?
I don't think so.
Yeah, my
honest,
first thought is that it has to, yeah, my first thought is it has to be case by case.
Yeah,
by
exactly.
taking it case by case, maybe we'll find out that one is better than the other 90% of the time or something. But
in my opinion, if it is a financial thing, if we are going to pay, well, according to traditional world, to our current world, we will put this fee or burden or whatever the cost to show another person's shoulder. Sure, we can talk about what is a good or ethical way, or we can talk about the user-friendly way. But I think, in my opinion, what I've seen in dApps or in other, they are trying to put this cost on the shoulder of users or consumers rather than the creator, unless it makes sense or it makes some benefits for the creator. So now I don't know that which case, or maybe I think maybe very few cases can benefit the creator, but most case it will benefit the creator if the consumer pay the cost, the pay for the data. Don't know, what do you think about which case or which scenario it will benefit creator to pay for datum and embed or inline the datum inside the UTXO? Because I think, sure, we can use the inline datum and blockchain as a database, or as a way to send the datum across different network or people. Okay, that's good. But we were already doing that too. I mean, we were living in around 1 year of a smart contract in Cardano, and we were passing around data. So why not doing that again?
yeah, that cost note is interesting. but I think for me, it takes a backseat to like the utility I'm looking for, right? So sure, there's definitely going to be some applications for which passing that cost to consumers is in their best interest. That's for, you know, like a DEX that's running at high scale, and their goal is to increase the bottom line, and there's lots of transactions. You can probably analyze that cost and say, okay, well, by making the creator of the datum pay, we save this much, and that's a great case. But for me, it's what's gonna make the DApp most effective, and we should have this part in mind. For example, in principle, who should, like in the bounty system, who should pay for creating that datum on a transaction? I don't know, if somebody wants to contribute, shouldn't we be excited that they want to contribute and not make them pay extra, you know, and want to minimize their cost or their barrier to entry? But for the utility of having inline datum in the functionality of the DApp, and recognizing that even though in principle this sounds dramatic, creator pays versus consumer pays, what is the actual cost difference? It's a fraction of an ADA that can be recouped later in some other way, right? We could just raise the reward for each bounty by that amount if it came to it. Really depends on the case.
Yep.
And because of inline datum, I can remove one line from the metadata that's being used in the bounty commitment transaction right now. So maybe it's a wash in the end. A little bit less data here, a tiny bit more cost over there, and at the end of the day, the transaction cost is pretty much the same.
But I wonder about the size of that. I mean, the size of the datum. How much would be same if the datum become bigger, the fields are more? I don't know. Maybe I haven't tested. I hope I will test that. How much that will increase the size of UTXO, and what are the thresholds? I mean,
Yeah.
how much
Yeah.
datum I can add to that UTXO?
Let's try that. Yeah, I would love to see some cost analysis of inline datum, just to see, and some, if anybody here can do an experiment with using an absurd amount just to know what the cost is, that'd be fun to chart that.
Two cases. One constructor like constructor 0 with so many fields, but another so many in nested constructor. I wonder that too. Constructor 1, 2, 3, like 20 constructor nested to each other. I mean,
Yeah.
that's cause different things, or the constructor 0 but with 20 field. I wonder this would be different or same.
Right. I have a hard stop in 12 minutes. Who else has clarifying questions about what we were able to cover today? Trevor, man, this is awesome seeing you do this. Thank you so much for jumping in there. We had Dagwell a few weeks back, run an impromptu session. Mix has been running some classes. To have you do this today, this is DAO building. This is it. And so I really want to encourage everyone here, you know, if you feel pulled to just try out facilitating live coding, doing mentorship in some way, please speak up when you're ready, and never any pressure to do that part. You know, that part's not for everybody. And you know, a group of people working together doesn't necessarily need everyone to do that. But if you feel pulled that direction and you want to, I would love to support everybody here to just have a chance to practice that. So Trevor, huge thanks for setting the example today. And this is it. I think we're onto something with how a DAO grows.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity and everybody's patience and figuring it out with me and sitting through it, and hopefully everybody learned something, and I know I did. So
Yeah.
thanks for the opportunity, James.
Oh man.
And then I know we've got to drop off here soon, but I saw a hand there. If you still have something you want to ask before we jump off.
Yes, of course, I do. Thank you, Trevor, man. This is awesome. I love the way you explain everything. You graduated. You're an awesome presenter. So yeah, I mean,
Thanks,
very
Juan.
good. Thank you. I mean, I was about to say that when James said it, and of course, James is the one that is supposed to say these things. But man, the job that you did today was awesome. Also, in the other hand, having James in the chat feeding in information, that was a great experience. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Juan.
Thanks, Juan. That was more than just the right thing to say for me. I really mean it. And I'm so like, where do we end up a year from now? And by the way, I've been, for anybody who hasn't heard of One Up, One Down, this is a project in the Catalyst ecosystem, and they're working on mentorship like a lot of other organizations. But I've talked to a lot of the groups that have ideas about mentorship, and nobody has done more research on it than the founders of One Up, One Down, Juliana and Natalie. And they are focused on a small case, let me check my language. They're focused on a specific case. They're focused on women mentoring women in business, because they want to start somewhere, and they also recognize the value, you know, for women who are trying to get a toehold, especially in a global sense, to really feel confident in an arena that's been dominated by one gender for a long time. But what they're building and the systems they're building will scale to other use cases. And so I'm supporting them to think through the tokenomics and the contracts that are going to be needed to build their system. That's going to be a contracted project with Gimbal Labs once it's scoped out. But more so, you know, I'm really excited to be helping them build it. And I'm going to ask for help on that from people here if you want to jump in on that when the time is right. But I'm also just really excited to take their ideas, right? And to, just like we're offering GBTE to the world, they're going to be offering a mentorship and tokenomics model to the world. And I do think the two go hand in hand. So it's going to be really interesting to be playing around with the systems that they're creating, thinking about how we incentivize mentorship, and thinking about, you know, alongside the PBL frameworks, how does mentorship kind of exist right alongside that? And I hope it's obvious that there are a lot of ways those two things talk to each other. So that's ahead for all of us. And I have a hunch that this is how we train mentors, right? We get together and we all take that risk of kind of leading. Trevor, it's such a relief, man, to have you doing this. And because I've been sitting here moving slow and trying to figure things out in real time for so long. And I feel a lot less lonely seeing you give that a try. So thanks.
Well, I appreciate it, and thanks for the encouragement, Juan, especially, and everyone. And it's been fun, and it helps me learn to do this too. So I hope it hasn't been too painful to sit through. But James, I really appreciate all the sessions you've done, and all this, all Gimbal Labs has set up here has been really awesome. So yeah, I appreciate it. It's been great.
Thanks. Oh, and that was what, sorry, I started talking about one up, one down, and I forgot what made me think of that. What made me think of it was part of their research is just showing how clearly being the mentor helps you learn something better, right? And we all know that when you teach something, you just understand it in a new way. And so for us to look, why do we enable mentors? Yes, of course, it's to spread knowledge, but it also grows the quality of that knowledge for the mentor. So I'm very excited to kind of formally for us to be showing that that's what happens out there in the world. So it's great to hear you say that. All right, team, that was fun. We got a recording of this one. Oh yeah, Mix, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that one thing I noticed, at least in Gimbal Lab, in this DAO community, it's not just mentorship. Something's more to that mentorship. Maybe it's just friendship too. That makes that glue and that continuity happen. Because I've seen in other places there is a mentorship, and it's like a duty or a job or something that they done it and say, okay, I'm free now. They want to finish it. They want to end it. But I don't feel that here. So I don't know what was